Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I painted the Battle for Asgard terrain pack. And it's actually quite easy to paint, so it's just a few steps, even though it's a long video because it's a lot of things in this terrain pack, a lot of different items. But I'm going to show you each and every one and every step of the way on how to paint statues, how to get that nice rock look, the statue texture, with just some just a few colors actually. Before we go any further, if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to my channel because I love to hear from you. That's actually the only reason I do this, and I'm going to show you a lot more videos in the future, of course, so stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon page where I'll be painting a lot more games and a lot more items that might appear on YouTube or not. Some are exclusive to Patreon, so make sure to check that out as well. So without any further ado, let's dive into Asgard. Alright, here we go. So I primed all the items with a black primer, and there are 5 different things in here, like this brazier. There's 4 of them. Nice and tiny braziers. I'm gonna paint them all in the same style. There is this fallen statue head, which probably belongs to the headless statue on the left. We got these fire signals. There's 2 of them. We've got these nodes, I guess they're called, which I put together, but I did not glue the top to it yet. So that way we can paint the inside and glue it afterwards. I think it's a nice effect to have the inside painted, as we're going to create some kind of glow effect. And lastly, the giant statue here. So I'm going to show you all kinds of techniques to paint statues and rocks, and I hope this is of any help to you guys. Alright, so let's get started. I'm using a dry brush and Dawnstone as a base color. Make sure to wipe off most of the paint. You can use some leftover spruce, for example, to make that happen, and leave a lot of the black shining through here. Make some circular movements when dry brushing, so don't wipe it in one direction, as you will get visual effects of that, and you do not want that. You want it to be random, you want it to be spread, evenly spread as well. And when dry brushing statues like this, or rocks, or whatever, make sure to think of where the natural shaded areas would be. And by saying this, I mean that, of course, you wanted the bottom part of the arm here, for example, to be darker than the top part of the arm. That would catch a bit more light. So that's actually, that's my way to approach dry brushing, and I think it gives a natural look to the overall result. So it's a big statue, so it takes a lot of time to dry brush this stuff, but also take your time, because even though we're using very few colors, it's important to use them correctly and to make the effect as nice as possible. Now you can use these sponges here as well. I'm going to use them later on in the video to create a similar effect. So just dip the tip in paint, wipe off most of it, and kind of stipple on the paint. Now the next layer we're going to use is Rock Art Flesh. It's the second color, and during this video you will see me using a lot of the same colors, as I want them looking more or less belonging together, of course, of the same material. And this kind of gives it a marbly look already. It's more towards the yellow, so it's not really a hard gray stone per se, but giving it more of a marble crafted look. What I like about these models is that the miniature itself is already made as something made of rock, so you can see the dents in there, the corrosion on the surface. So for example, this halberd he's holding is very dented and looks very nice. Next we're using Ushabti bone for a third color, and that really gives it that marble look, more of a kind of a clay stone statue, so to say. And that's the color I'm going for. Otherwise it's just a lot of gray, and I imagine Asgard to be a little bit more colorful. So this is the result so far. Looking pretty nice already, but we're gonna give it some weathering effects. And for that I'm using Straken Green to add some corroded, moisture looking, moldy, well, whatever, you get the idea, right? And for this I'm focusing mainly on the areas that would normally have the most effect of this moisture. So when water's dripping down, it drips on certain points. So also with the base, I'm focusing on the areas around the feet, and from the feet towards the lower part it would be dripping down. I'm darkening down the bottom a little bit with some Dawnstone, just to have some extra detail here, some extra color maybe. Make the top part look more present. Now I'm going to focus on the rock with Rhinox hide, and for this I'm also wiping off most of my paint, painting the entire rock part, but kind of roughly, so leave some black shining through. It adds to the general color effect later on. Try to avoid the rest that we painted before. Now I'm using the sponge here to stipple on some Dawnstone. You can do that with a dry brush as well, but I'm just trying some different techniques here. And this way you get a very random pattern, which basically is what rocks is all about, right? There's no pattern in there at all, actually. So just stipple this on. And for the rest of the colors, we're going to repeat the same colors we used before, starting with some rock art flesh, which I'm also stippling on this rock base. Try and create some random pattern here. This is old, this is worn, this is, well, you get the idea, right? Now if you find yourself having too much paint on the tip of your sponge, just use the back side or the side of the sponge and kind of dry that out, spread it out. Next step, I'm using Ushabti bone to kind of make the rock and the statue blend together, but have different colors of their own. The part between the legs is difficult to reach, but you can use a smaller dry brush, for example, to get there. Now we're gonna add some more sand tones with some Mournfang brown. I wanted it to be a kind of a reddish rock, so some red tones in there, and the highlighted colors we used before add to the brightness that we're achieving now. After this, we're going back to one of the previous colors with some Ushabti bone to highlight that brown, which now gives a totally different effect than before. I'm now going back to Mournfang brown to create some effects of erosion, some dark moldy patches on the steps of the statue, on the base. Kind of wipe it out. You don't want it to be too bright, but just to have it look like it has seen a lot of water flowing by. And that's it for our statue. Now to continue with its head. And we're going to repeat the same steps and colors we used before. So first off, Dawnstone to really highlight those sharp edges and make those details pop out. I'm using a smaller dry brush for this, of course, because it's quite a tiny detail, quite a tiny prop. Next step, rock art flash. And as before, focusing on where your light would hit the statue the most. And the most obvious choice, of course, is the front for visual effects. Third step, Ushabti bone, to get that yellowness as we had in the statue. Focus here mainly on the top of the head and leaving the bottom a bit darker. And then also the weathering effects with some Strachan green I'm applying here as well. Because it's lying on the floor, it has seen a lot of water, rain, so you can go a little more green on this. Make it look kind of moldy, as it's been there for many, many years. And that was it for the head. Next is the fire signals. Also some dawnstone on the rock parts of this tower, the signal tower. Make sure to keep making those circular movements to spread that paint as thin and evenly as possible. And you guessed it, Ushabti bone for the next layer. I wanted to have the same weathering effects on all the models I'm using, so I'm starting with all the base colors, and you can see me using all of the same colors we used before on the next models as well. Now this model is of course more interesting because it has the flame, some metal effects, some gold, and for that gold I'm using Retributor armor. Now it's up to you if you want to paint the tiny holes inside or maybe wash them later on. It could be nice having them black, dark at least. Or you can paint the entire thing and do it afterwards. I painted the whole thing and I wanted to use some Wayland flesh shade to shade it. Next, some lead belcher on the metal ring, the top of this brazier holding the flame. And then with some gray sear, I'm base coating the entire fire part. So the flame, but also the bottom, because that would be glowing afterwards, and I'm going to use some contrast paints to make that happen. So actually the entire flame and its base, the bottom I should say, I gave a coat of gray sear to make that really bright. Now we're gonna let that dry, and in the meanwhile use some null to paint the metal ring and shade that a little bit. You can highlight it if you want. For the bottom of this brazier I'm using snakebite leather to make it appear as if there were some wood chips in there maybe, and it also adds to the glowing effect afterwards. Next is I'm bringing back the color with some black Templar. So just some brown is shining through now, and you get more of the idea of a glowing mass in the bottom. You can go quite heavy on the black here, because it's mainly burnt. Next up, the bottom of the flame I painted with Iron Jaws yellow. Stick to about 1/3 of the flame, because the rest we're going to be giving some extra colors building up towards the red. And the fun thing about using contrast paints, when you're using it quick enough at least, is that you can kind of flow those colors together, blend them. So next step is I'm using some Iandan yellow, which is more of an orangey look, and go over the paint we painted before just a tiny bit to create a transition, add some details here and there, and I'm doing the exact same thing with some Blood Angels red for the top part. Also blending that with the previous layer to make it look natural. Now you can see some of that yellow shining through. It's a beautiful effect. And that's what I love about these contrast paints. I'm highlighting the rim of the brazier with some Stormhost silver. And then it's some details for the base with some auric armor gold. Add some sharp edges there, some shine to the metal. And now the last step is to add some glow. And for that I'm using Ironjaw's yellow again, the brightest color we used for the flame, to create some shine, some glow effect to the inside of this brazier. You get that nice yellowy glow effect. Next up is the braziers themselves, the tiny ones. We're gonna approach it in the exact same way as we did the last one. So some grays here to give the flame and the bottom a base color, just to be able to use some contrast paints later on. You don't have to be coloring the exact bottom, just slap it on there. Then the rock Dawnstone. Now see if you can guess the next color. We've been using it a couple of times now, and we're gonna approach it the exact same way. The base of this bowl, we're also using some Dawnstone there. Just stipple it on, smear it out to make it an even look. Then, yeah, there it is, Ushabti to get that yellowness in there as well. I'm painting all of them together. Then the metal parts, the metal rim, I use Leadbelcher. So it's the side and the top of the rim. And then we're going to approach the flame the same way we did before, with Ironjaw's yellow in the bottom. And we're going to be blending that with the next colors in the next few steps, so make sure to have your paints ready when starting this. Yanden yellow is the second color. And you can see me here kind of adding a drop and then smearing it out, blending it with the previous layer. I'm pulling it towards the top. And for the red part, Blood Angel's red again. And also blend that with the previous color. And you can see that the rest is still wet, and I'm kind of pulling it into each other, adding some dark and bright parts here and there. Then for the bottom, I'm using the same colors that I used before, and you can kind of mix it here. So use some of the previous 3 contrast paints and paint the entire bright part of the base here. We're going over that with some darker paint later on, so make sure to touch a lot of stuff here. You don't have to do everything, just focus on the middle, because towards the edges it would be darker, right? I'm using snakebite leather again for the more darker tones in here. I'm going all around it. Just some easy brush stroke here. And you kind of blend those colors together now. Now while we're letting that dry, we're using Retributor armor to paint the gold details on the bottom part of this brazier. And then some Reichland flesh shade to shade those gold parts. Get some nice dark edges and corners. So once the shading is done, we're going back to the inside of the brazier using Black Templar to add some burnt effect here kind of leaving those glowy parts shining through, focusing on the outside of the items in there. So the inside of every piece of wood or charcoal or whatever it is would of course have the glow, and the outside would be black. Canoptic alloy I'm using for the highlighting of the golden parts, so the edges, the tops, just to get that extra shine effect in there. Okay, and then it's time for the nodes, I guess they're called. So I base coated it in black, and as I said before, I did not glue the top part to the rest yet. We're gonna do that at the very end, so that we're able to paint the inside of this thing. And we're gonna use these same colors as we did before. For the stone part, that's Dawnstone, dry brush that on there. That's basically most of the model. Then some rock art flash to get our first highlight in there and give it that stony, rocky look. A bit of a marble color it is, I guess. Final step, some Ushabti bone for the last highlights to kind of brighten this thing up and make it match with the rest of the things we painted before. And then all the metals I painted with lead belcher, and there's a lot of it on this model, so the entire rim of this thing, I think it's called the node, whatever that may be. So make sure to go all around this. Of course, we're going to paint the top lid as well as the insides of the openings here. Then with some Retributor armor, the tiny gold details on the side. Now we're using Brazier again to brighten up the inner part that would emit the glow on this thing. And we're going to use contrast paints again, so a nice and bright undercoat really helps creating this bright effect. Before we continue, we're painting the rim with some lead belcher as well. And you can see me painting two at the same time here. Then wash all of the metal parts with some Nuln Oil. You can go quite heavy on this, make it a bit grim. And if you want, you can highlight that afterwards with some Stormhost Silver, which I didn't. Some Wayland Flesh Shade on the gold parts. And then it's time for the inside with Iron Jaws Yellow. Nice and bright yellow emit of power. That would be glowing on the inside of the top as well. So I painted all the inside edges with the same color, because that would seep through this light, right? So make sure to let that dry. In the meanwhile, we're using Canoptic Alloy to edge highlight the gold parts. Give that a nice reflection and some detail. And then it's time to glue it together. And let's see what the result of that is. So I'm just adding some glue to the bottom here. And carefully placing it on this because you don't want any glue in your painted parts. And that's it. And look at it shine and glow. It looks really nice, I think. Right, and here are the final results of all the Asgardian terrain pieces. I really enjoyed painting it and I hope you did as well. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to the channel and leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one. Bye bye.